Chapter 8 of A Copper Harvest by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. Jim Sanders. On the afternoon of the following day, a party of 4 stood facing the opening into the deserted copper mine. The most prominent of the group was the bronzed and bearded Gideon, who had fully recovered from the effects of the drug administered to him by Otis Clymer. The other 3, it is almost needless to say, were Jack Howard, Charlie Fox, and Meyer Dinkelspiel. No difficulty had been experienced by Charlie in obtaining his father's permission to accompany Jack Howard and Mr. Prohl to Montana after Gideon had explained the situation to the doctor and shown him the magnificent specimens of pure copper he carried in his grip. As soon as Prohl missed his pocketbook, a new light broke in on those in the secret. They agreed that the thief was Otis Clymer. And Meyer had been right when he said he had seen Clymer's face at the partly open window that night, and that the villain set fire to the surgery not only for the purpose of revenging himself on Dr. Fox, but to effectually get rid of Gideon Prohl as a bar to his newly hatched plan of getting possession of the copper mine for himself. Dr. Fox had strongly objected to losing the services of his German boy, who was a handy factor in his establishment, but Meyer had made up his mind to go to Montana with the others, and it was useless to oppose him, for he declared that he would surely run away of his own accord. As Prohl and the 2 boys took his part and interceded in his favor, the doctor was prevailed upon to give a reluctant consent to his going with the party. "Well, boys, here we are on the ground at last," said Prohl enthusiastically. "Here's the creek I spoke to you about, which runs into the north branch of the Cheyenne River, 5 miles or so away. And yonder, you see the hole in the rock which affords entrance to one of the richest copper deposits in the great Northwest. Unfortunately, it isn't really ours as yet till we find Jim Sanders, who sold me the option on the property. And it may never be ours as the case stands," said Jack gloomily. "Otis Clymer, who robbed you of your pocketbook and thereby came into possession of the option, has probably destroyed that document, and it's pretty certain he lost no time coming here to get the inner track of you. His object, of course, if he has been able to raise the money necessary for his purpose, is to meet Sanders and persuade that very unreliable person to sell him the ground, knowing that this course will be perfectly safe, since you will never be able to present the option yourself. If, after he has accomplished this, you interfere with your claim, he will demand that you produce the option, which, of course, you cannot do. Our only hope in this matter is to run across Jim Sanders before Clymer can get his work in. All you'll then have to do is pay down the balance of the purchase money and get a bill of sale for the ground." "That's all right," spoke up Charlie Fox. "But even if he does succeed in getting the bulge on us, what is to prevent us having him arrested on a telegraphic order from Sackville for the double crime of attempted murder and arson?" "We could try that, of course, but I fear we should meet with many difficulties out here, especially if he is smart enough to make friends with an eye to that particular contingency. And the fellow is not such a fool but to understand and provide against the risk of arrest and subsequent extradition to Nebraska." "Well, if we let the rooster get the best of us, then I votes we go by the wilderness and kick ourselves for a party of jackasses," interjected Meyer Dinkelspiel with a solemn earnestness. "Good for you, Dutchman," said Prohl, slapping the round-faced youth on the shoulder. "And now, boys, follow me into the mine and I'll show you a sight which will make your mouth water. You'll see more copper in 5 minutes than you ever looked at in all your lives before." A couple of hours later, Gideon Prohl and the boys returned to Rocky Gulch. They ate supper at the hotel, and having arranged to bunk there for the night, Prohl set about making inquiries relative to Jim Sanders. "I never know Jim Sanders to be of such importance as he seems to be just now, stranger," said the landlord of the Rocky Gulch Hotel, when Prohl buttonholed him in search of the information he wanted. "You're the second one in 2 days what wants to know what the whereabouts of Lazy Jim, as we call him, for we've never known him to work a day since he came to the Gulch nigh on a year ago. 'Pears to me your face is kind of familiar, pard. Weren't you round these diggings a fortnight or 3 weeks ago?" "I was," said Prohl. "I bunked here a couple of nights and had my meals at your dining room." "Well, now, I thought I weren't mistooken your fees. We have strangers coming and going all their time, but I generally remembers a face once I takes notice of it. What might be your object in wanting to see Jim?" "I want to see him about a bit of ground down by Beaver Creek I bought from him when I was here last. I paid him $100 down and owe him a small balance which I'm now ready to settle." Well, now that accounts for the wad Jim had at the time. Folks around here thought he must have robbed somebody, but as there weren't no proof agin him, of course he weren't troubled. But he didn't stay around here more'n a day before he lighted out, and he ain't been heard from since. You say there's somebody else looking for him yesterday? Sure, big city-fied-looking chap named Plunkett. That name conveyed no information to Prowl, who had not heard of the landlord at Sackville's eyesore, and the prospector wondered if he was an emissary of Otis Clymer. "Might I ask what you wanted with that there land down by the crick?" inquired the proprietor of the Rocky Gulch Hotel curiously. "It don't seem a likely sort of place that I heard of. You ain't discovered paying dirt, have you?" This was asked with undisguised eagerness. "No," replied Prowl with assumed carelessness. "No such luck." "Well, now, I was in hopes you had," said the man in a tone of disappointment. "'Cause why, these here diggins aren't just what they was a year ago. Things look like as if they was going to peter out. Well, you ain't said what you bought Jim's claim for. You aren't expecting to build a palace and live just for the fun of the thing, are you?" "Well, hardly," replied Prowl, falling in with the man's rude humor. "I've discovered there's a peculiar kind of stone near the creek that might be used to advantage in railroad building, and—" "Oh, I see," said the landlord of the hotel, thrown off the scent as Prowl intended. "Well, I wish you luck with it." Prowl asked several other inhabitants of Rocky Gulch about Sanders, but each one had the same answer. Jim had not been seen in the gulch for over 2 weeks, and they did not know where he was. "Kind of hard luck, isn't it?" said Prowl when he rejoined his companions after more than an hour's ineffectual search for a clue to Sanders' present whereabouts. "I should say it is," replied Jack Howard. "What are we going to do?" "We'll have to go back to Trinity in the morning and see what we can learn in that place. By the way, I heard there was another person trying to locate Sanders." "Otis Clymer," exclaimed Jack and Charlie in a breath. "No," replied Prowl, shaking his head. "It was a big man named Plunkett." "Plunkett?" shouted Charlie Fox in a tone of astonishment. "Not Dave Plunkett?" "I didn't hear what his first name was. Do you know somebody by that name?" "The cheap hotel where Otis Clymer lodged of late in Sackville is kept by a man named Dave Plunkett. I'll bet Clymer has taken him into his confidence as a moneyed partner in this enterprise, and so that he himself can keep under cover as much as possible. He's a cute rascal." "Well, if that's the case," said Gideon Prowl reflectively, "we've got our work cut out for us to beat the pair of them. Tell me what you know about this Plunkett." Charlie gave the prospector the history of Dave Plunkett's operations in Sackville, so far as he knew, as well as his opinion of the man's character. "Well," said Prowl, "I judge if he rounds up Jim Sanders before we do, it'll be all day with us. Without that option, I haven't got a ghost of a claim on the ground. It's 1,000 pities things have turned out the way they have. Who would have suspected we had a listener that night in your pop's surgery?" looking at Charlie Fox. "I never heard of such confounded hard luck," returned Charlie, kicking the wooden front of the hotel spitefully in his silent wrath. "Just when we might have sighted a big fortune for the crowd of us, not to speak of $1 million or $2 which, by right of discovery, is coming to you, Mr. Paul, in steps a pair of unmitigated rascals, with every chance of scooping the trick at our expense." "By Shinger," chipped in Meyer, "do we stood that? I feel so mad that I would like to do something already yet." At another time Jack and Charlie would have given the German boy the laugh, but they were not in laughing humor at the moment. The outlook was altogether too serious. Next morning the rig which had brought them from Trinity to Rocky Gulch was hitched up, and Gideon, Prowl, and the 3 boys started back along the trail. They had perhaps accomplished half the distance to the river town when a solitary horseman, astride of a wretched nag, was seen coming toward them in the distance. "By Shinger!" exclaimed Meyer. "If don't be a scarecrow, I'm a liar." "He certainly looks like a hard case," said Jack, watching the stranger's approach with not a little curiosity. When the distance between them had lessened about 1/2, Prowl, who had been examining the newcomer with great attention, suddenly gave a shout that fairly electrified his young companions. "Jim Sanders, by all that's wonderful!" End of chapter 8.